hello there, and welcome to Spoiler Piece Theater, the podcast that doesn't give a shit about spoilers. We just want to talk about the movies. My name is Megan Kearns. My pronouns are she, her. I write film reviews for Edge Media Network. I'm a co-host of the Slashers podcast, a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association, and a member of Galaga, the Society of LGBTQ Entertainment Critics.
My name is Dave Riedel. My pronouns are he, him. I write for I've written for lots of places, and I'm also a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association.
My name is Evan Crean. My pronouns are he, him. I am co-chair of the Boston Online Film Critics Association, co-author of Your 80s Movie Guide to Better Living, and co-host of the It's the Pictures podcast.
Woo!
Yeah, you are. Woo, woo, woo.
You should change the name of it to It's the Pictures, motherfucker. It's the Pictures, motherfucker.
Just put it in parentheses.
Yeah. It's like,
like to imply the motherfucker.
Yeah, new co-host, new title, and it'll still pop up in the same place on like all the things.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Making it spicy. And speaking of spicy, yes, we do like spicy food and we do like to talk about food, but we're not talking about food right now. Going to tell you, we talk about movies and we have movies to talk about, but over on our Patreon, I want to tell you about that. We talked about this month's environmental movie poll winner, Aaron Brockovich, and we had a great conversation about that. We had some divergent opinions, which I love that because it always makes things spicy and interesting. And yeah, and it was a first time watch for two of us and a rewatch for one. So that was interesting too, to hear some, new eyes on it and hear people's fresh perspectives. So yeah, so go check that out if you're a patron and if you're not, consider joining for $5 a month. Now, for this week's show, we have 3 movies. We're going to be talking about Boy Kills World, Humane, and Butterfly in the Sky. And we're going to kick things off with Boy Kills World, which is an action comedy thriller. It is directed by Moritz Moore in their directorial debut. It's written by Tyler Burton Smith and Aaron Remmers, based on a story by Remmers and Moritz Moore. And it stars Bill Skarsgård, as well as Jessica Roth, Michelle Dockery, Famke Janssen, and Brett Gelman, and a whole bunch of other people, including Charlton Copley. And so here is the synopsis. This is a bit lengthy, so I'm going to condense it, but it's from the press release. Bill Skarsgård stars as Boy, who vows revenge after his family is murdered by a deranged matriarch of a corrupt post-apocalyptic dynasty that left the boy orphaned, deaf, and voiceless. Driven by his inner voice, which is voiced by H. John Benjamin, one which he co-opted from his favorite childhood video game, Boy trains with a mysterious shaman to become an instrument of death and is set loose on the eve of the annual culling of dissidents. Bedlam ensues as he commits bloody martial arts mayhem, inciting a wrath of carnage and bloodletting. All right, so this premiered at the Toronto International Film Fest. It also played at the Boston Underground Film Fest, and it's coming in theaters. Actually, it is in theaters now, as of when this airs. So Dave watched it. I only got to see the first 5 minutes of it, but I didn't stop watching because I just liked it or anything. I just didn't get to finish the film. But Dave saw the whole thing. And Dave, take it away. Tell us about it. What did you think?
It blows. Moving on.
Whoa!
Okay, to expand upon that, I'm really tired of I'm angry about something or I'm going for revenge, so therefore I will become martial arts expert and kill everyone as if I'm in the Raid Redemption.
Good movie.
It is a good movie, but it's like one of the first of its kind, So not the first, but arguably the best of its kind. And a lot of this stuff in Boy Kills World is played for laughs. I'm not a fan, generally speaking, of the Skarsgårds, except for their father, maybe. Definitely not a fan of the blondie who was on what's the HBO show about the vampires? Thank you,
Alexander Skarsgård.
Thank you. I can never remember that fucking guy's name.
I know. I love him.
Yeah, I like him too.
I love Eric Northman.
The thing is, I would expect men who have these voices to be better actors anyway. Actually, I think Bill Skarsgård is a better actor than his brother or half brother. I don't know which. And he doesn't do the eye thing like in It. So that's there's less creepiness from that. But this is just kind of a long, tedious, same kind of fight scenes over and over kind of thing. And there are some funny moments, but all the funny moments come from like the side characters. Like Bill Skarsgård is his character is just not funny. And Jessica Roth spends the whole movie with like a motorcycle helmet on her head. I had to look it up, but Famke Janssen is old enough to play Bill Skarsgård's mother. I never would have guessed that because she looks like she could be his older sister. Charlotte Copley was very good. And I think that the standout was probably Brett Gelman, who is one of the members of the corrupt fascistic family that is ruling over. I don't know where the fuck this is. I don't know what the apocalypse was. There is no explanation for any of that because honestly, that's not really the point. But it's just sort of like, well, how did this even fucking happen? I don't like what? These people are dipshits. How could they control anything? like every member, like high-ranking member of this family is a fucking moron. So I don't understand how they took over anything. And stupid people have been in power, sure, but they're just dumb. And the whole thing is a case of mistaken identity because boy didn't see his family murdered in front of him. His mother made him, she put her hand on the gun with him and made him shoot a mom and 2 kids, and then he couldn't shoot like the last person, so he just fired his gun over and over and then ran away into the jungle. The guy who he didn't kill, but boy killed his children and his wife, kidnaps him and brainwashes him into thinking that Famke Janssen and her family killed his family, and he has to go seek revenge and bring the family down from the inside. And so that's what it is. Yeah.
All right.
And as it turns out, and he's got this sister who keeps popping up in his, like the little sister that he thought was, that he shot, or that was shot and killed, who is actually Jessica Roth, as it turns out. They have this kind of bond where they swore they'd always be there for each other, and he gets her to turn at the end, and she puts an axe in Famke Jenssen's forehead. The other thing about this is I harp on this all the time, but I'm tired of your shitty fucking CGI blood. Fuck off with that shit. It looks awful every time. Every time. It looks bad when David Fincher does it. It looks bad when Moritz Moore does it. It looks bad everywhere. Nobody does CGI blood well, except maybe Naughty Dog, but that's a video game. Mm-hmm. So,
woohoo, Last of Us.
This fucking movie, it was just tedious. The only reason I got through it all in one sit was because we had the show. Otherwise, it would have been people. If you listen to our Patreon episode about Aaron Brockovich, I mentioned that it took me about 5 hours to watch a 2-hour movie. This would have taken me like 5 days because it's just like, there's so many movies where just people are doing their martial arts shit and it's supposed to look cool. And this is also this is not like a John Wick thing where there are lots and lots of long shots and you can see everything happening. Mm-hmm. This is like cut, fuck off.
Get the fuck out of here with your frenetically edited action bullshit.
Yeah. And it's not stupid frenetic. I mean, there's a rhythm to it. And sometimes they do go for the longer shots, but at the same time, it's like, well, there's nothing in this is practical. So, your stabbings and your whatevers and it's just it does have an interesting sort of post-credits, The Graduate kind of moment. But, when the brother and sister are sitting there eating their favorite cereal together, like they did when they were children, and they kind of had this look on their faces like, okay, now what do we do? But it also leaves it open for a sequel, which is kind of pissy. So, I mean, Michelle Dockery's in this movie for 5 minutes, and her like name's all over it. It's like, everybody in this is basically a glorified cameo except for Bill Skarsgård and to some degree Jessica Roth. But it's just kind of a drag. Whatever. Who fucking cares?
That's a bummer. I will say, I think it's interesting that you brought up the Raid Redemption because the mysterious shaman played by Yayan Ruhian, he's in the Raid and Raid 2.
He
So I
sure
think
is.
that's very interesting.
I'm sure that's part. I'm sure they cast him because of that. You know.
Yeah.
The fight scene at the end with him is epic, but I also have to say I don't know how anybody could have survived it. You know, he ends up dead, of course, but how Bill Skarsgård's character and Jessica Roth's character are not just, you know, a pile of flesh and bones on the ground, I don't get. Because the injuries that they sustain are fucking unreal, you know? So.
Well, I will say that statement alone. I mean, I was going to finish watching it anyway, but that statement alone, spoiler pieced me into wanting to finish it.
Yeah.
Even though you said it was so tedious and I don't like frenetic editing, I do very much like action films where the sequences have long takes and wide shots so you can see everything. But I will say that alone, now I want to see it.
Yeah, I think a lot of the reason there's so much cutting is because it's like they want to do close-ups on what they think is the cool shit, because there's a lot of flipping and jumping and legs wrapped around the head and the torso and, you know, like UFC kind of shit. So I think they wanted to show that off. But, you know, when you show the same, like, great, there's 14 different moves, but you've shown them all to me 8 times each. So who fucking cares? I don't know. I remember when action movies were good.
I mean, I think there still are good
there
action
still
movies.
Are good ones. I know.
Yeah.
I just, you know, I sound like a fucking, God, I sound like a boomer saying that. I'm not a boomer.
I was going to say, you sound like an old.
Yeah.
Your favorite phrase.
I sound like an old. Anyway, I didn't love it. I don't recommend it. So I think Bill Skarsgård is fine, but I also think that if you were pumped up enough and you had anything resembling some natural grace, you could probably play this part. So,
all right,
there you have it. My
right, fucking
awesome. Don't go see it review.
All right. Well, let's talk about our next film, the documentary Butterfly in the Sky, which, yes, is about Reading Rainbow, which Evan and I saw. This is directed by Bradford Thomason, who is also the editor, and by Brett Whitcomb, who is also the cinematographer. And let me give you the synopsis that is from the press release. For 26 seasons, Reading Rainbow met young viewers in their living rooms, whisking them away on far-off adventures into the boundless world of books. Inspiring and nostalgic, Butterfly in the Sky takes audiences behind the scenes of this beloved PBS children's series and tells the story of its iconic host, LeVar Burton, giving an inside look at the challenges he and the show's creators faced in cultivating a love of reading through television. Reliving the show's legacy is a refreshing return to the written page, but you don't have to take our word for it. Did it do? Like, I can hear the music. Yeah, so this is a very standard documentary in the sense that we're doing talking heads, we're doing interviews to look back over the documentary, we're showing clips. But yeah, this is, I will say right out of the gate, this is probably very hard for me to be objective about this in any way, shape, or form, just because I loved Reading Rainbow. I grew up on Reading Rainbow. I was watching it since its premiere, and I loved it and adored it, which I know you did too, Evan.
I was going to say, I'm saying yes because I feel the same way. It's very hard for me to be objective about this as well.
Yeah. But yeah, this traces the origins of the series and looks at the co-creators and how they came to the project. And it looks at the producers and how they all came together to find a host and how LeVar Burton got the role or job as a host, and how, you know, his star turn, of course, as Kunta Kinte in Roots, and how he was a theater actor, and how with his success of Roots that put him on, you know, huge stage nationally, and how they didn't think they were going to get a big star like LeVar Burton, but then they got him. And it looks at I love that we revisit the book reviewer kids and we see them now as adults, and they're reminiscing about their time on the show and the books they read. And I think it's really, yeah, I think it's really interesting because we get to see that and we see how many of the crew had an education or teaching background. But yeah, I mean, so if you're not familiar with Reading Rainbow, this is a good introduction to it. And, basically they would take one book and they would kind of highlight that. And then LeVar Burton would go on location and it was kind of like a mini documentary. And there would be an on location shoot in relation to something in the book. And they would talk about the book and they would read the book. And then kids would give their reviews of other books that were kind of similar. There was a similar theme to them. But yeah, it was really focused on reading and a love of reading. And in the documentary, they say this, that it wasn't so much teaching kids to read or teaching in a kind of educational way, the way that like Sesame Street was, but it was very much to foster a love of books and of reading. So Evan, what did you think?
I loved it. I loved it. I mean, I love Reading Rainbow. I always loved Reading Rainbow as a kid. I thought it was an amazing show. I've always been a big fan of LeVar Burton, and like especially being a fan of Star Trek: The Next Generation growing up. Between this and that, like it's just LeVar was the best. I'm not normally. Yep. I don't say like celebrities like first names like that normally. I just like LeVar Burton though. He really like, and they talk about this in the documentary. Like he makes himself. He can speak to kids in a way that's just so accessible. And as a host of this show, he was just so accessible, and he made you feel like you were going on these adventures with him. That was what one of the interview subjects said. Or they said that basically they ask kids and they'd say, "Oh, well, I went with LeVar to blah blah blah."
Yeah,
and it really did feel that way. So he was a really excellent host. And I'm glad. I don't think this documentary really gave me anything like revelatory about the show. It was really interesting hearing the path from the seed of the idea to the show itself. I really loved hearing about how they developed the theme to Reading Rainbow, like the theme song, the iconic song, and seeing the people who created the song, like, put it on the synthesizer or whatever, get it to the like right setting and everything. How they, did the lyrics, how they found the woman who sang the song, seeing clips of everybody singing the song, like the interview subjects from like the kids to the people who worked on the show, because it is very catchy, earwormy kind of song. So I loved all that. And I think what I really liked the most was when they kind of zeroed in on what made LeVar Burton so special as a host, and also some of the things that like he did that were so important, both like when they had that young adult author who's interviewed, and he talks about how representation to him was so vital as a kid, and seeing LeVar Burton as a black man on television, and talking about how he had that hoop earring that he wore, and he was just so authentically himself, and how much that meant to him. And he was like, there were just a couple people that I knew, like black icons that had that hoop earring. It was Michael Jordan, LeVar Burton, and Ed Bradley. And like, those were the guys that were like,
yes.
And I just thought that was really like sweet and charming. And I really enjoyed when they delved into how he stood up for himself in terms of like being authentic to himself and authentic to his appearance, because they talked about how, the creators, the other creators of the show were like, oh, well, for continuity, he should have the same look the whole time. And it was like, no, he wanted to have a mustache or have a beard or, like have different hairstyles and things. And I love that he stuck up for himself, because I just thought that was so cool. And it definitely shone through in the show in terms of like presenting a very like authentic person. And that meant so much to him as a person, but it also clearly meant so much to viewers, especially young black kids that were watching Reading Rainbow. And so all that stuff I just found absolutely fascinating. And much like in similar documentaries, like I remember watching, about like Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood and about Sesame Street, it's really fascinating and exciting to see educators, how they came up with the ideas for these iconic kids shows, and how their passion really led them to create something special. And you were alluding to it earlier when you said that like they mentioned Mr. They had Sesame Street, which was like really focused on like early educational development, like pre-K, and you had Mr. Rogers. It was kind of like, oh, we're talking about like emotional like growth and things, but they filled like a very
And
specific
social issues,
niche of fostering enthusiasm
Mhm.
for reading. And so I think that's really incredible that people had their like finger on the pulse of what kids wanted and needed, and we're able to identify, here's a gap in the market and here's how we can fill it. And I think that speaks to why the show is able to run for 26 seasons, you said? Yeah,
26, yep.
it's amazing that it ran for so long. And it was such a bummer that it like went off the air, and hearing how they just kind of like lost funding and that fell out from underneath them, that was so
Yeah.
sad.
Yes. I know. That was wrenching. Like, it wasn't that, they were done, or they felt like they'd told all their stories they wanted to tell. But no, it was that they ran out of
Mhm.
funding. Yeah. It's like, and yeah, I think it's really, but what's fascinating, I loved all the parts that you said too. I especially loved like the part where LeVar Burton talked very openly about how he had not fights, but like disagreements, with some of the producers. And I also think it was interesting that the young adult author that you talked about, he brought up a really great point. He was like, it's not that, people, and he was talking from the Black community's perspective, as far as it's not that people weren't reading or loved books. He's like, because, there were lots of Black librarians who were doing that work, and there were lots of teachers who were, fostering a love of reading. But it was so much about the representation. Like, it was so impactful to see, somebody like LeVar Burton on TV, who looked the way he did and who loved books, and other kids, that age, which I think was great. Speaking about the ending of Reading Rainbow and how tragic that is, I love that we get to see LeVar Burton testify in front of Congress on behalf of public television. And I love the way he talked about his kids, and that he's going to go home and he hopes, that nobody does anything, foolish, and that his kids will be able to watch public television, because it's so precious and rare that there's programming that's not trying to sell your kids anything. And I think that was a really great point that somebody in the documentary made, one of the co-creators or producers or writers, and they talked about how, Sesame Street had a lot of merchandising because of, Elmo and Big Bird and Cookie Monster and all of the Muppets. But Reading Rainbow had nothing to merchandise in that way. And so they had a much more uphill battle to get funding. But I do think it was also really fascinating that we hear about how like they thought, like, at first in the pilot, like, we went to Scholastic and told them, like, oh, your book is going to be on our show. And they're like, yeah, and who cares? Like, how is that going to sell books? And then, over the course of the show, it became so big that they were getting boxes and boxes of books that publishers were sending them, which I think is so interesting. But one of the things that really stuck out for me, and I, as a fellow Trekkie, I really want to hear your thoughts on this, Evan. One of the things I absolutely adored was when LeVar Burton, they covered it in the documentary, that he really, really, really wanted the role of Geordie LaForge, and he got it. And so all the crew, they thought, oh, that's it. LeVar Burton's leaving. He's got this amazing opportunity. And he even thought, like, one of the episodes was going to be his last that he filmed, and they interviewed other hosts, but nobody could fill that role the way he could. And so he stayed, and he's like, I wanted to stay, and I love that. And that really made me so emotional hearing that story. And I want to hear what you thought.
Really, for me too. And hearing that they mutually decided, both, PBS and Paramount decided, we're just going to make this work. We're just going to make it work so he can do both. I thought that was really amazing, that collaboration, because I'm sure that part wasn't easy.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But yeah, of course.
No,
as a Star Trek fan, and I remember that episode of Reading Rainbow. It's so iconic with the like crossover when he takes you behind the scenes of Star Trek.
Yes.
That was one of my favorite episodes, obviously. And I loved seeing that clip about the transporter and how they were using the sparkle water to do the effect. I love that they showed that in the documentary. That was so much fun.
It was a sweet moment. Yeah. Yeah. You had mentioned the other documentaries, the Mr. Rogers documentary and the Sesame Street documentary. And yeah, these are really hitting me in the feels. And this one did too. We're going along and I'm like, this is nice. This is such a lovely documentary, very nostalgic. I'm here for it all. And then as we're getting towards the end, I'm like, I just could not stop crying. I'm like, it was just so sweet, and just feeling everyone's devotion and passion for this show and for children and the respect they had for children. And I love that the co-creator, she said, if anybody said, anybody working on the show was like, oh, well, this is just a children's show, and kind of in a dismissive way, they didn't work for them anymore. And I love that they were putting that much respect and thought into this show, because it was such a special thing. And it was just great. And LeVar Burton was great. And he really did feel like he was talking just to you. And there was like such a personability there and intimacy. And
yeah, he's such a great storyteller. It's like why I fell very behind on it, but I loved listening to his podcast, LeVar Burton Reads, where he'd sit there and read, short stories to you. And that was always a lot of fun. And
yeah, I love that they touch on that. They show like a clip of that interview with Mo Rocca.
Yeah. One thing I was actually surprised about is that they didn't mention that LeVar Burton did like a Kickstarter to like revive Reading Rainbow as like an internet thing. I don't know if that was just because they felt like it was not connected to the show, or like if it never took off. But I donated to it like back in the day, and like one of the rewards that I got was to Skype with LeVar Burton, and it was amazing.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
That's magical.
It was great. I think it was like 10-minute or 15-minute conversation. I can't remember. And we just were talking about, I was like, what do you like to read? And like, we were just like talking. And then at the very end of the call, I lost it when he said, but you don't have to take my word for it.
Oh my God. That's amazing. Oh my God. I can still hear that. Doo-doo-doo.
He knows how much people love that line.
He knows. I know. Yeah. There's no way he can't know how special that was. Also, speaking of that, I want to hear all about that entire conversation. But speaking of that, I also love that he said, this is me on Reading Rainbow, but it's like a version of me. And he's like, this is the wonderment version of me and the 8-year-old version of me who's just excited about everything. And I have to say, as a person who is excited about everything, I love seeing a person who's excited about everything on TV.
Yeah, that sense of wonder really worked on the show.
Yes. Yeah. I'm still floored you guys talked to LeVar Burton.
It was incredible. I mean, this was in the early days of doing this show, but I did mention to him that I did a podcast, and we talked a little bit about that. And it's kind of funny because like, I feel like not that long, we were talking a little bit about podcasts too. And there was like not that long after he announced his show. And I was just like, oh my God, this is amazing.
You're totally fanning out.
Wow, you guys are making me want to watch Reading Rainbow and this documentary.
Yes. Do it.
Listeners, I've never seen Reading Rainbow, so eek.
It's so lovely. It's just, I mean, like long after I was young enough to watch it, I would pop in and watch occasional episodes because it just was lovely, and it was just kind of nice to revisit and see what was what. And and I also, speaking of that, I think that's interesting that the show ended up towards its later seasons pivoting to talk about really, really intense issues like 9/11 and homelessness and other very pressing social issues. So
yeah, I respect to them for doing that whole piece on 9/11 and going to visit that school that was like closest to the World Trade Center. And like, that whole thing, oof, that really hit me in the gut.
Yeah. I was gonna say, that was intense. But what a lovely, what a lovely show. What lovely people. Just
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You two really are fanning out.
It's totally. Yeah, well, at least I said that up front. That it was just, it's hard to be objective about this because it is such a show that's close to my heart.
Mm-hmm. Same. It's like, yeah, as a kid who loved reading and as a kid who loved reading Rainbow and loved Star Trek, like all of those intersecting things. Yeah, no, it was special. It was a special show. Yeah. And I love that the documentary clearly embraces that and that we get to see how it all came together.
Yeah.
Evan, do you have any final thoughts? Any final things you want to share about your conversation with LeVar Burton?
That's been long enough. I think it's been literally 10 years now, to the probably to the day at this point. I don't remember exactly when it happened, but it's about 10 years ago. So I don't remember a ton about it. But I will say I also really appreciated that the documentary covered the celebrity appearances and how like James Earl Jones came in and he was supposed to record and he said, "I'm really sorry, but can we reschedule to tomorrow because I haven't had a chance to rehearse this and I want to give it its due." And they were like, yeah, of course we will reschedule for you, James Earl Jones. And then you get to hear the book that he was narrating and you think, okay, I get why he wanted to like really take a beat. Or when they were talking about how Run DMC wrote a whole song for Reading Rainbow that they performed about rapping about reading, and they're like not sure how it was all going to come together, and then they showed up and just nailed it.
Also, on a sidebar note, I was very sad that they originally approached Salt and Peppa, who, by the way, was my first concert that I ever saw, and I loved Salt and Peppa. And thank you, and they declined. I was so bummed because I know, because one of the women on the show was like, "Oh, I thought it would be cool to have women rappers," and but kudos to Run DMC. Yeah. They were great. All right. Well, let's talk about our final film that Dave and I saw. It is Humane, the horror thriller directed by Caitlin Cronenberg in not her directorial debut, but her feature film directorial debut. And this is written by Michael Sparaga, and it stars Jay Baruchel, Emily Hampshire, Sebastian Chacon, Enrico Calantoni, Alana Bale, and Peter Gallagher. And here is the synopsis from the press notes. Humane takes place over a single day, mere months after a global ecological collapse has forced world leaders to take extreme measures to reduce the Earth's population. In a wealthy enclave, a recently retired newsman has invited his 4 grown children to dinner to announce his intentions to enlist in the nation's new euthanasia program. But when the father's plan goes horribly awry, tensions flare, and chaos erupt among his children. Yeah. That is basically it. The children are all
dicks.
I won't say they're jerks, but yeah, they're dicks. They're jerks. They don't really see each other except during holidays when their father brings them all together. Even the father says to some delivery guys who are they're delivering a piano, and they see Jay Baruchel on TV, who's basically advocating for kids to sign up for euthanasia program. But then he says he's not, but he really is. Even Peter Gallagher is like, yeah, that guy's a dick, and it's his son. But yeah, so there's this beautiful lavish dinner that his wife has, their stepmother has cooked for them because she loves to cook because she had a restaurant and it closed due to Asian hate. Because she's an Asian woman and it was an Asian restaurant because it's being blamed on Asian countries, the ecological collapse. And so, and then we see this group that is going around that is hired to administer the euthanasia, and then they take the bodies away, and this is to reduce the population. And that's what Peter Gallagher springs on his kids. He's like, oh yeah, he's like, they're here early, and I've signed up for the program, and so is Dawn, that's his wife, and but then he's supposed to sign some paperwork. He doesn't agree with it, but then in the next scene we see, he did sign the paperwork, and he's dying due to euthanasia. But Dawn, in the meantime, has run away, and because she has run away and there are supposed to be 2 bodies, they need another body. So then the kids have 2.5 hours to figure out which one of them is going to be dead to fulfill this quota. And that's what happens. And then they are basically at each other's
Wow.
throats.
That's the premise for a movie,
Yeah.
all right.
It's a movie. It's a premise. Dave, take it away. What did you think of this?
Well, we know who is the least of the Cronenbergs now.
Oh,
This movie's bad. I mean, it's just bad. It's an interesting idea from the ecological standpoint and, all that shit. But then to have it sort of devolve into just, siblings at each other's throats because the screenplay demands it.
mm-hmm.
It's really irritating. And none of the only sibling with any sort of nuance is the adopted kid whose name I can't remember. And then Jay Baruchel and the other two sisters. One sister is seriously horrible, and then one is sort of wimpishly horrible. I don't know.
Yes.
She's kind of a milquetoast. She's kind of a dud. But she goes along with her older siblings because I can't remember why.
I don't think we ever really know why. I think they just kind of entice her with the money because they say if there's one less of us, we'll have a bigger inheritance.
And you're a struggling
she's an aspiring,
actor. You don't have an income really. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And Emily Hampshire's like, it's expensive to go after your dream. So you want more money.
Yeah. So there are also a couple of logic gaps in this movie. So they're supposed to take two corpses out, and Enrico Colin, I can never pronounce his last name, Colantoni, who is the, government liaison. I don't fucking know. It's the name of the agency is DOCS, DOCS, the Department of something. I don't remember what it is. He says, all right, well, we got your dad's body, but we need another body. So, figure it out. And then Rachel, Emily Hampshire says, well, does it have to be one of us? Can we just give you a corpse? And he's like, well, it kind of makes a mess for the paperwork, but it can be done. Fine. So at first you think they're going to just kill some random asshole. But what ends up happening is they decide to turn on the adopted brother because he's a former junkie and he's done a whole bunch of shit. And, he's finally gotten himself together and it looks like he really has turned a corner. They don't give a shit. But then Enrico Colantoni says later, he's like, look, hey, I come from 4 scenes later. He's like, look, I came for a York body. And then at the end, they don't they do kill a York actually, but they also kill a third person. They kill the adopted brother's girlfriend while she's running away. They shoot her in the back, the government agency. And then just how are we going to square all this? And then I guess the implication is that the bureaucracy doesn't care, but the youngest sister ends up dying from a wound that the adopted brother rightfully gives her. They are planning to have her act. I don't know if they know she's going to die or not, but her wounds, it's pretty serious. She gets stabbed basically in the colon. Ouch. And I don't know. It's totally all over the place. It's trying to be a comedy, but it's also trying to be a thriller. And it's not thrilling, and it's not particularly funny. I think I like Jay Baruchel a lot more than you do, I think, Megan. I think that's true. His character is the only one that has what could qualify as humor attached to it. And I think that he does as well as he can with it. But I think this screenplay is fucking toothless. I mean, you've got an opportunity to make this statement about government bureaucracy and climate change and all this stuff. And I'm sure you could do that. Well, I mean, there is Don't Look Up, which is a terrible thing to compare anything to because that's a shit movie. But it just could be different. You could take a different tack. And like I said, it just becomes this thing about these 4 siblings turning on each other. And who fucking cares? I just met these people 5 minutes ago and they all suck. Fuck them. I hope they all die. Christ. I mean, the only you kind of feel for Enrico Colantoni more than anybody else.
You do?
Well, no. I mean, but at the same he's such a likable presence, generally speaking. I mean, he is Keith Mars after all. True. He's, it's just kind of like, look, the guy's got to go collect more corpses. Just fucking do your job. And then they make it, seem like they're going to kill him, which of course they don't. And, I'm just waiting for this movie to end and show us that he has survived, and he has. And they've gotten 2 corpses instead of 1. They have the youngest kid who died of her wounds, and then they take the adopted kid's girlfriend who they shot to death. And it ends with everybody who survived at a piano recital that the adopted brother is having because he was a piano prodigy, and the playing, whoever does it is quite lovely. But I just like, what the fuck is this fucking movie? There's nothing to it. It looks kind of good, I guess, which I would hope so, because Caitlin Cronenberg is a professional photographer. But it has, and it's also like strangely moralistic in a stupid way, which I'm not even going to get into that shit. But because everything about this is so fucking dumb. But like, what's the brother's name? Is it Brandon Cronenberg? Is that his name?
Yes.
It's like he looked at his dad's movies and said, "Dad, you haven't gone far enough." and his sister Caitlin has looked at movies and gone, Dad went too far. In fact, we're going to keep the bones the same, but we're going to try to make it light comedy. Like, what the fuck, man? The sensibilities just don't line up in this. The screenplay is garbage. The direction is indifferent. Ugh. Framing's okay. It looks all right. Megan, how about you?
Oh, I didn't like this at all.
Okay, thank God we're on the same
I was
page,
worried
man.
for a minute there. Megan, you were kind of quiet, and I was thinking, oh no.
No, I just was letting Dave run with it. No, this movie is terrible, and I feel so bad. I never look forward to criticizing a movie.
Yeah,
I always want them all to be good, and especially a woman director.
But we don't.
Right? No, we want them to be good. We don't want to be bored. We don't want to be frustrated in the wrong ways. Like, no, we want this to be good. But no, this is. I agree actually with your entire assessment, except for Enrico Colantoni, who I've never liked.
What?
I've never watched Veronica Mars, so I can't say that. But I couldn't stand him on Don't Shoot Me or Just Shoot Me. Couldn't stand him on that. I don't like. It's Just Shoot Me. I know I said it wrong.
Don't Shoot Me.
It's a better title. No, it is a better title. Me. But yeah, I didn't like him on Station 11. I don't like him.
That's fair.
And yeah, so. But here's the thing. I know what you're saying, because I know I'm in the minority. I know a lot of people like him, and I know he has a very likable presence. But here's the thing. His character reminded me very much of Amy Adams in the Julie and Julia movie.
Oh,
where
interesting.
Yeah, where she kept saying, I'm such a bitch. I'm such a bitch. I'm such a bitch. Well, it's because I'm such a bitch. And I'm like, but you're not. You're very nice. What are you talking about? And that's kind of how I felt with him, in that everybody keeps saying, oh, well, you're just a sadist. Well, you're just psychotic, and you just want to watch the world burn, and you just like watching people die. Like Emily Hampshire's daughter says that to him.
Yeah.
You just want people to suffer. And I'm like, but does he? Like, we don't actually know that. We're not really shown or told anything that leads me to actually really believe that. So even though I'm not really a fan of his, I agree with you. Like, I didn't think he was like, yeah, he's a dick because that's what the plot dictates. But I'm not actually buying that he's like really evil or malevolent or, or wants to stick it to rich people, because that doesn't fit what we're seeing. And, there have been so many Eat the Rich movies lately, and I'm all here for a class commentary and talking about, class privilege and white privilege, and that's great and all. But this is just not doing it. This is not hitting that for me. And I don't think this is a really good environmental commentary. I do think it's a good premise, though, which is the reason I wanted to see it. It's a great premise. But I would say that it's not the exact same premise, but there's a similar premise to a movie that came out last year, and it's Plan 75, and it's a Japanese film. It's a dystopian film about a plan that's enacted where, in order to reduce the aging population and kind of the strain that older people will put on resources, there's a euthanasia program where people volunteer to be euthanized, and it's about a woman who is contemplating that. So, and that's a really great movie. So, and it digs into a lot of societal and cultural and environmental issues. So I think there's something here in its ideas, but much like you, I just found this really tedious. I was bored. I didn't give a shit about any of the characters. And I don't need my characters to be likable. They can be despicable, but they have to be interesting. They have to be compelling. And they're not. None of them are interesting. None of them are compelling. They're all archetypes, and not even actually well-drawn archetypes. They're just there. And I don't think the acting is very good at all. I actually think Jay Baruchel is probably better than most of the other people in this, as far as the acting. And I do like Peter Gallagher. Weirdly, I've always liked him. I can't quite put my finger on why, but I have always liked him.
Yeah. Well, and it might be the eyebrows. I ever saw him in a Sex, Lies, and Videotape, and he is a fucking scumbag of a human being. There you go.
I think of him as from Center Stage. He's like the dance company head. And in The Brother and While You Were Sleeping. He's in that too, and he's great in that. I love While You Were Sleeping. Anyway, but yes, I love Peter Gallagher, so I'm glad you do too. But yeah, no one is doing a good job in this. There's not good acting. The writing is atrocious. It's no good. It's no good.
Yeah.
And I don't know about you, Dave. I found, and part of me was like, I know what they're trying to do. They're trying to show how apathetic and amoral this governmental organization is. But the fact that we see Noah, the adopted brother's girlfriend, who is a black woman, because she's concerned because she gets a disturbing message from him saying I hope I see you again. And then she shows up what the fuck? Where's Noah? And then they're like, go get help. And she runs away. And when they shoot her in the back, and I'm like, she's on screen for 3 minutes and we're already murdering a black woman. I don't know. It was just gross. It just bothered me. And I also agree with you that there's some logic gaps too in this. You're totally right. First, Enrico Calantonia is oh yeah, it can be anybody. And then it's no, it has, like you said, it has to be a York. And then also, wait a minute, Peter Gallagher volunteered for this euthanization program. Why isn't he one of the people honored for this week's people who volunteered?
Yeah.
Why is it the girlfriend and the sister who died? Why is Peter Gallagher not there? The logic just is not there. So yeah, this just droned on.
I'm glad I missed it.
Yeah. I would have rather watched fucking Reading Rainbow documentary show that I've never seen with a guy who
it was so good.
I think was crummy as Geordie LaForge. I do. I am not a next generation person like lots of people are. I think it's fine, but I think a lot of it's very cute. So, any spray, that's neither here nor there.
Very cute. Interesting.
But I am interested in Reading Rainbow as a concept. So, now that I've seen the Humane concept, I'm like, who gives a fucking shit about Humane's concept? This is baloney. Grade A baloney. BOLOGNA.
But what's funny? I want to know more. Okay, I get that we're having a population reduction program, but what other initiatives are happening? Because what only seems to be happening from the news broadcast is that, okay, so climate change is happening and things are terrible and everybody's wearing umbrellas to shield themselves from the sun. Although nobody's wearing sunglasses or hats. I'm like, that's a little weird. Everybody's using umbrellas, which, listen.
It's a Canadian thing, I
right?
guess.
Listen, as someone who like scorches in a matter of 30 seconds in the sun, I use an umbrella too when it's like midsummer, but I also am wearing a wide brimmed hat and sunglasses and loads of sunscreen. So I don't know. It just was weird to me. And it's like, I want to know about other things going on in this world, not in this movie, but in this world. And it just, I don't know. I just think it's a really missed opportunity. And I never felt that the like fight at dinner had a lot of bite behind it. I never felt like it had any oomph. So yeah. Anyway, this was a fail for me too, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to say about this, Dave, before we wrap up?
I dislike this so much that I kind of don't want to know what she does next. You know, it's just, I mean, the only reason I haven't seen Infinity Pool is because, frankly, reading about it terrified me. So
yeah, it's all right.
I was just
it's
like,
an all right movie.
I don't even know if I want to like it sounds, I mean, if you think the violence in whatever the other one is that came before it, Possessor.
Oh God.
I mean, that movie, talk about visceral. Yikes.
Yeah, seriously. And I liked it, but I was like, whoa, if that movie was
Yeah.
tame compared to whatever the next one was, count me out.
No, I don't agree with that. I think Possessor is more
Okay.
visceral,
Okay.
personally.
You're making me
I think
less
so.
afraid now.
I think so. I don't think it's as good. I mean, this has nothing to do with Caitlin Cronenberg other than their siblings. But yeah, no, I think Possessor is excellent. And I was not really a fan of Infinity Pool. It's fine. It's kind of just there. It's all right. But and it's gross. Don't get me wrong. It's gross and it is brutal. But I didn't think it was more so than Possessor. But you may. You may. Your mileage may vary.
Anyway, what I think I was trying to get at was just, you know, this movie is so icky, but not in its gross way, but icky in its just bad way that I don't really know if I want to see your next movie. I mean, I will, I guess, because, you know, David Cronenberg has arguably created a legacy. So, yeah, that's where I come down.
Yeah, I think this is proof that, you know, children and their parents are separate individuals. And just because certain people in a family make a certain kind of film doesn't mean they're all going to make that kind of film, I mean, guess.
Some of David Cronenberg's early movies are more miss than hit, like Rabid, like The Brood, although The Brood has its moments. But yoicks in a way, as Daffy Duck would say.
I just feel kind of bad in a weird way, because she's a Nepo baby, as so many are in Hollywood. And even I say in Hollywood, even though they're Canadian. But I think like she's never going to escape. And like Brandon Cronenberg's not either. They're never going to escape the comparisons to their father's work. So, which is kind of, I don't know.
When you have a filmmaker like David Cronenberg, who has been so successful at creating a genre
no, you're right.
that is repulsive, but somehow very popular. I mean, how are you going to top that shit? I mean, Possessor, you know, made an effort.
On that note, let's wrap up. Let's recap.
Okay.
All right. So, Boy Kills World, Boo. Dave. Boy Kills World is in theaters as of April 26th. Butterfly in the Sky premiered in theaters March 17th, and it is available to rent digitally April 30th. Evan, I think it's safe to say we both would recommend it.
Yes, highly recommend it, but you don't have to take my word for it.
Do. Oh, so good. I also would recommend it highly. It's a great nostalgic trip, and if you've never seen Reading Rainbow, it's a great educational film. And Humane is in theaters now as of April 26th, and it will be streaming on Shudder July 26th. Dave, I think it's a big pass for both of us,
it's
right?
Hard pass.
Yeah. Oh, so sad. So sad. But I completely agree. All right. We want to give a huge thank you to our sponsor, Peace Patron, Heather Sachs. Thank you so much, Heather, for your support.
Thanks, Heather.
Thank you.
And we want to give a huge thank you to our amazing editor, Otto Clammer. Otto, thanks for making us sound so great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Otto.
I went up on that one instead of down.
I know. You did go up a couple octaves. It was nice. You're spicing it up. You can find Spoiler Piece Theater anywhere you get podcasts. You can find us at our website, spoilerpiece.com. You can find us all over social media. We're at Spoiler Piece Theater on Facebook, and we're at Spoiler Piece on Instagram, Twitter, Letterboxd, Threads. And I think that's it. So come say hello. Come say hi. Let us know what you think of these movies, or any movies for that matter. You can email us, spoilerpiece@gmail.com, or you can give us a call
at 862-21-PEACE.
Leave us a voicemail message, text us. Let us know that Dave and I are dead wrong and Humane is a masterpiece, or let us know that you also loved Butterfly in the Sky as well. Or maybe you loved Boy Kills World too. Or maybe you didn't like any of these. Or maybe you have another thought about movies or food. We always bring up food because we like to eat.
Or maybe your favorite episode of Reading Rainbow, or a book review that you would perform Reading Rainbow style. I would love to hear listeners if you do a little like book review of Reading Rainbow style.
That's amazing. Or who your who your favorite Star Trek character is.
Oh yeah. Love to hear about that.
Yes. So see, we're giving you a bevy of topics here to chat about with us. If you like the show, please consider rating and reviewing us. That helps us get the word out, which is great. You can go to ratethispodcast.com/spoilerpiece. It will take you to your preferred platform of choice. You can also just go directly to Apple Podcasts, which helps us out a lot, or to Spotify. And if you really, really like the show and you're not already a patron, consider joining. As we said at the top of the show, for $5 a month, you get access to weekly bonus episodes. And this week's episode was on Erin Brockovich, which was our environmental themed movie poll winner. We had a great time talking about that. And you get to vote in monthly polls if you're a patron. So if you're already a patron, thanks so much. And if you're not, consider joining. And you can also, if you want to show your love for the show another way, you can get our merch at our website. You can go to our TeePublic store. We have a ton of different merchandise options. We have t-shirts, hoodies, pillows, notebooks, mugs, a whole slew of things you can check out. And yeah, that's going to do it for us. So my name is Megan Kearns. I write for Edge Media Network. I'm also a co-host of the Slashers podcast. I'm a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association and a member of Gallica. You can follow me on Twitter and Blue Sky at OpinionS World, or on Instagram and Letterboxd at The OpinionS.
My name is Dave Riedel. I write about movies. I'm a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association, and I'm on Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, Blue Sky, and Threads as Dave Sees Movies.
My name is Evan Crean, co-chair of the Boston Online Film Critics Association, co-author of your 80s Movie Guide to Better Living, and co-host of the It's the Pictures podcast. You can follow me on social media as Real Recon, and that's real as in film reel.
And we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.